Attorney General Eric Holder says alleged 9/11 plotters will be tried by the military instead of civilian courts. In a 15-minute news conference yesterday, he said Congress was undermining counterterrorism efforts by passing laws that prevented trials in U.S. federal courts.
In November of 2009, I announced that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other individuals would stand trial in federal court for their roles in the terrorist attacks on our country on September the 11th of 2001. As I said then, the decision between federal courts and military commissions was not an easy one to make. I began my review of this case with an open mind and with just one goal: to look at the facts, to look at the law, and to choose the venue where we could achieve swift and sure justice most effectively for the victims of those horrendous attacks and their family members. After consulting with prosecutors from both the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense, and after thoroughly studying the case, it became clear to me that the best venue for prosecution was in federal court. Let me be clear. I stand by that decision today. As the indictment unsealed today reveals, we were prepared to bring a powerful case against Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his 4 co-conspirators, one of the most well-researched and documented cases I have ever seen in my decades of experience as a prosecutor. We had carefully evaluated the evidence and concluded that we could prove the defendant's guilt while adhering to the bedrock traditions and values of our laws. We had consulted extensively with the intelligence community and developed detailed plans for handling classified evidence. Had this case proceeded in Manhattan or in an alternative venue in the United States, as I seriously explored in the last year, I am confident that our justice system could have performed with the same distinction that has been its hallmark for over 200 years. Now, unfortunately, since I made that decision, members of Congress have intervened and imposed restrictions blocking the administration from bringing any Guantanamo detainees to trial in the United States, regardless of the venue. As the President has said, those unwise and unwarranted restrictions undermine our counterterrorism efforts and could harm our national security. Decisions about who, where, and how to prosecute have always been and must remain the responsibility of the executive branch. Members of Congress simply do not have access to the evidence and other information necessary to make prosecution judgments. Yet, they have taken one of the nation's most tested counterterrorism tools off the table and tied our hands in a way that could have serious ramifications. We will continue to seek to repeal those restrictions. But we also must face a simple truth. Those restrictions are unlikely to be repealed in the immediate future, and we simply cannot allow a trial to be delayed any longer for the victims of the 9/11 attacks or for their family members who have waited for nearly a decade for justice. I have talked to these family members on many occasions over the last 2 years. Like many Americans, they differ on where the 9/11 conspirators should be prosecuted, but there is one thing on which they all agree. We must bring the conspirators to justice. So today, I am referring the cases of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid Mohammed bin Atash, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Ali Abdul Aziz Ali, and Mustafa Ahmed Hawasawi to the Department of Defense to proceed in military commissions. Furthermore, I have directed prosecutors to move to dismiss the indictment that was handed down under seal in the Southern District of New York in December of 2009, and a judge has granted that motion. Prosecutors from both the Department of Defense and Justice have been working together since the beginning of this matter, and I have full faith and confidence in the military commission system to appropriately handle this case as it proceeds. The Department of Justice will continue to offer all the support necessary as this critically important matter moves forward. The administration worked with Congress to substantially reform the military commissions in 2009, and I believe that they can deliver fair trials and just verdicts. For the victims of these heinous attacks and for their families, that justice is long overdue, and it must not be delayed any longer. Now, since I made the decision to prosecute the alleged 9/11 conspirators, the effectiveness of our federal courts and the thousands of prosecutors, judges, law enforcement officers, and defense attorneys who work in them have been subjected to a number of unfair and often unfounded criticisms. Too many people, many of whom should know better, many of whom certainly do know better, have expressed doubts about our time-honored and time-tested system of justice. That's not only misguided, it is simply wrong. The fact is, federal courts have proven to be an unparalleled instrument for bringing terrorists to justice. Our courts have convicted hundreds of terrorists since September the 11th, and our prisons today safely and securely hold hundreds, many of them serving long sentences. There is no other tool that has demonstrated the ability to both incapacitate terrorists and collect intelligence from them over such a diverse range of circumstances as our traditional justice system. Let me be clear, and let me be very clear. Our national security demands that we continue to prosecute terrorists in federal courts, and we will do so. Our heritage, our values, and our legacy to future generations also demands that we have full faith and confidence in a court system that has distinguished this nation throughout its history. Finally, I want to thank the prosecutors from the Southern District of New York and the Eastern District of Virginia who have spent countless hours working to bring this case to trial. They are some of the most dedicated and patriotic Americans I have ever encountered, and our nation is safer because of the work that they do every day. They have honored their country through their efforts on this case, and I thank them for it. I am proud of each and every one of them. Sadly, this case has been marked by needless controversy since the beginning. But despite all the arguments and debate that it has engendered, the prosecution of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his co-conspirators should never have been about settling ideological arguments or scoring political points. At the end of our indictment appear the names of 2,976 people who were killed in the attacks on that deadly September day nearly 10 years ago. Innocent Americans and citizens of foreign countries alike who were murdered by ruthless terrorists intent on crippling our nation and attacking the values that we hold dear. This case has always been about delivering justice for those victims and for their surviving loved ones. It is about nothing else. It is my sincere hope that through the actions that we take today, we will finally be able to deliver the justice that they have so long deserved. Thank you.
All right, if I could have two questions. What you described as the blocks on Congress were just passed at the end of last year, yet there was a whole year when that indictment was handed up from the grand jury. So why not move faster? And second question, in February you ran into some 9/11 families on Capitol Hill and you told them, in your opinion, that going to military commissions was rolling the dice. Now today you've said that going to military commissions you had complete faith in the process. So has there been a change in your thinking?
Well, I made clear back in November, and I made clear today, that in terms of what I think the best venue for these cases, I continue to think the Article III courts are the best place to bring them. With regard to the amount of time that it took, you have to remember that in 2009 we were in the process of reforming. We reformed the military commissions. There was local concerns expressed about the bringing of the cases in Manhattan. We had to deal with that. And then Congress started to deal with these restrictions that they put in place. We tried to fight them. We have made this decision as quickly as we could, taking into account all of the factors. And as I indicated, I considered the possibility of bringing this case in a place other than Manhattan, but within the Southern District of New York.
Mr. Holder, Is it your understanding that bringing these cases in military commissions allows for seeking the death penalty? That's one of the concerns that was raised previously about bringing these cases there.
I think the death penalty can certainly be sought. It's an open question about whether or not somebody can plead guilty in a military commission and still receive the death penalty. That, I think, is still an open question.
What is this decision due to the administration's plan to close Guantanamo? If these military commissions are held at Guantanamo, won't that mean that the facility is going to have to stay open for many months, if not years, to come to handle the trial?
We will fight to get those restrictions lifted. I think it will necessarily have an impact on our ability to close Guantanamo. We'll probably extend the time. It is still our intention to close Guantanamo. It is still our intention to lift those restrictions.
How long do you anticipate these commission trials will take?
I don't know. I'd refer those to the Department of Defense, which I think will be issuing a statement sometime later this afternoon.
Mr. Holder, can you've been pretty clear on how you feel about the congressional actions here, but presumably most of those lawmakers represent constituents who have their own views. Is it your thinking that you know best and that there is just no room for the public's view on where a trial should be held?
No, I don't want to hold myself out as, omniscient or anything like that. The reality is, though, I know this case in a way that members of Congress do not. I have looked at the files. I've spoken to the prosecutors. I know the tactical concerns that have to go into this decision. So do I know better than them? Yes. I respect their ability to disagree, but I think they should respect the fact that this is an executive branch function, a unique executive branch function. I have to deal with the situation as I find it, and I have reluctantly made the determination that these cases should be brought in a military commission.
And the public, such as the groups in New York City that came to oppose the trial there, should they have any voice at all in such a decision?
We took into account a whole variety of things in trying to make a determination as to where these cases could be brought, and it was one of the reasons why I considered the possibility of bringing it in Otisville Prison, which is in the Southern District of New York, but is in upstate New York. Would not have come up with any of the concerns that people had about bringing a case in Manhattan, would have lowered the costs pretty dramatically. But even that option was taken off of the table by Congress. Look, I grew up in New York City, I grew up in Queens. I went to school in Manhattan for high school, for college, for law school. It is still a place I consider home. I had full confidence in the ability of the people of New York, the authorities in New York, to try this case safely and securely in New York City. If I didn't have that faith, I would not have made that initial determination. It is still my view that that case could have been tried in Manhattan.
Based on what you just said about the death penalty, you said it's an open question. Does that mean there's a very real chance that they could serve life in prison as opposed to getting the death penalty, which you probably have a better chance of that in the Eastern District of Virginia?
Again, I'll defer that to the folks at the Department of Defense who will be responsible for these cases. It is an open question, but it is one that could be resolved, and we'll have to see how it plays out.
That sounds like 10 more years of litigation all the way back up to the Supreme Court, maybe 20 years after the anniversary. This could still be litigated.
Well, I have confidence in the ability of the folks in the military commissions and on the military side to bring these cases before the appropriate authorities within a relatively short period of time and to resolve them ultimately. And what I hope I have done today is to hasten the date by which victims and the families of victims will have some certainty. Thank you.